Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Clashing Identidades podcast. My name is Ras Guevara. I, along with my co-host Eduardo Solis, say hello, Eduardo.
Hello, people.
Um, we are here for our continued conversation about education, New York, and our own personal stories of being Mexican-born New Yorkers, kind of navigating our professional careers. And episode 1 was a wonderful conversation, a very raw, very emotional conversation between Eduardo and I about telling our stories, a little bit about our history, a little bit about our struggle as undocumented students here in New York. Eduardo, tell me a little bit about the feedback that you received from, friends and family or coworkers that you received after our first episode.
A lot of people were really surprised to hear us talking about those things, especially people that I've known since middle school, right? Nobody knew. So, well, not a lot of people knew, but everybody was pretty supportive and they were, you know, I guess content or happy like with somebody being so raw and honest like you said, and it came like as a shock to a lot of people because nobody expects people to share that at this level, right, on the internet, Spotify, YouTube, whatever. But what I said to them is, like, this is like it is for me, like we have on our tag, right? It's an outlet, but it's also meant to be a resource for anyone going through this. So I've gotten in touch with a lot of people kind of navigating the same circumstances, and also mentors of mine who knew about my situation. They reached out to me and they said, really proud of you guys both. This is really necessary work. And yeah, I've just been trying to do what I can to reach people who are going through the same things, and I think this is helping a lot.
Yeah, and listen, I work in sports media. I work in a career that you seldom have the opportunity to have conversations outside of sports. And I heard from a lot of people who were like you were surprised that I faced the ordeals that I faced. And I'm not here. We're not here. Neither of us are here to pat ourselves in the back or to oh, look, we've made it despite all these struggles. We're not doing that at all. And like you said, what we're trying to do is just put up a beacon, right? Put up a beacon in the sky for people to see it. And I always go back to the analogy of the 16, 17-year-old kid right now in remote learning at home and who may be undocumented, who may be struggling to struggling with this this burden, this weight, because being undocumented in this country is very difficult, and a lot of people don't realize how difficult it is. There are no ways to compare it other than just not being a full, existing in a proper space, not being a full citizen, not being a citizen at all.
Yeah,
Like there's a lot.
nobody looks out for you in whatever. Like, if you want help and whatever it is, you have to look for it, right? That's pretty much how I got connected with like all the organizations that have helped me. It's not because like people offered it to me. Like, I looked for those things, right? So you have to be really resourceful, and sometimes it's hard, right? Because you don't have support. So for me, sometimes it was hard, but I think when I thought about it, I just thought to myself, it would be harder if I don't do anything and just go through this by myself.
You and I have talked a little bit at length about how this burden feels like like it's an embarrassing little secret that you don't want to share with people. And what we're trying to do with this project is simple: is say, look, it's not your fault. It's not an embarrassment. It's a thing like no other. It's a struggle and an obstacle that you need to overcome. We've already been reached out to by a number of people who want to be a part of this conversation for a number of reasons. Number one is they want to provide hope and inspiration for other people. But number two is they want to provide resources. There are a ton of resources that people might not be aware of, and they want to come on the podcast and kind of share some of those resources with you and with anybody listening out there. Um, but while we're on the topic of continuing the conversation of undocumented students, um, how would there's a constant conversation going on right now about Joe Biden and the Biden administration's plan to legalize or the pathway to citizenship for a number of people. Um, what would legalized immigration status mean to you? What would it do if tomorrow somebody says, Eduardo, you are now a full citizen? For an undocumented student, what does that mean? What does that mean in the short term and in the long term?
For me right now, I don't honestly I don't know what it means for me because I'm already like halfway there. I mean, I'm guessing things would be like a little bit faster, speed up because everything has been held back. Even before COVID, right? Everything was held back because of Trump, right? So now with COVID, everything is like extra slow. But with Biden, I guess the hope would be for things to speed up. But to me, honestly, I have no idea what it would mean. But for an undocumented student, if I was still in college, it would probably mean I don't have to rely on getting internships with nonprofits, right? That's one of the things that really set me back in terms of my financial career, I guess. I want to go into finance later on. But because, all those firms like Deloitte, like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all of those firms do recruiting at the university level, I couldn't participate in their internships, right? Or any programs that they had. So now, um, after college, even though I already have well, it's not a full time guaranteed, but I'm working at VaynerMedia, right? I'm still looking for things that interest me because at the end of the day, right, Vayner can always say like, hey, thanks for your work these past 3 months, but we're gonna go with someone else, right? So what I'm doing now is like I'm still interviewing with Bloomberg, with Deloitte, with all these companies, um, and I couldn't do that for like 4 or 5 years, right? So I think for anyone who's still an undocumented student, that would be a huge benefit. Not just because of their career, but they can potentially get like financial aid. They can get help from the universities themselves, right? So I think it would just be a positive overall, and they'll be able to work, right? So one of the struggles that I had was not being able to work legally, and it's tough, like th- working as an undocumented person, there's so many things that go on at the workplace that nobody addresses because nobody knows how to or they're afraid to, right? Um, and a lot of times, even like if people do know, their bosses actually take they reprimand them, right? So or they just don't pay you or whatever. Like it never happened to me, thankfully, but I know firsthand it happened to my uncle, to my stepdad, right? So you just never know what happens.
Yeah, no, listen, man. I mean, it seems that the Biden administration is pledging uh, to do some important work, and the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021 should be a great step forward for allowing people to come out of the shadows. Um, it's very important for people to do their own research, for them to pay attention to exactly what's happening on with the laws. Every case is unique. Every person is unique. Every individual case has to be treated on a case by case basis because what's good for me or what benefits me doesn't necessarily benefit Eduardo or doesn't necessarily benefit anybody from any different, multiple different countries. But I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about the DACA program, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program was a Obama administration creation. It instantly changed the lives of many, many people across this country. A very close relative in my family, benefited from it. I, I I did not benefit from it because I was already a permanent resident by the time I was already married, I was already working. But it was a beautiful thing to see people with the hope and the opportunity of just coming out of the shadows is the way I describe it, right? It's like a lot of the things that my kids take for granted, or a lot of those tiny little milestones that are celebrated in this country. There are movies made about kids getting their driver's license, right? It's a major plot point if in every coming of age story. And there are those things that you know that don't are not possible for undocumented people in this country, right? Getting your license for the first time, going out for a drink at the age of 21. It's not something that undocumented people could do because they don't have an ID to go into a bar. And if you don't look old enough, they're not going to let you in. And trust me, that's a, that's a memory that is robbed. That is a like this part of you that is never fulfilled because of the inability to accomplish these small, tiny, menial tasks, but are a huge part of every person's life. But anyway, so DACA was under attack under the Trump administration. They went to the Supreme Court to try to eradicate it, to try to minimize it. And once they kind of all that failed, they just simply stopped taking applications. They were like, fine, we're not going to get rid of it, but you know what? We're not going to take applications. We're just going to take our sweet time. And a lot of people were left in limbo, especially renewal applications. A lot of people who were, they're about to their DACA application was their status was about to expire and they needed to renew it. They were left in limbo. But now the Biden administration has pledged not only to fortify and preserve DACA, but again, like we were mentioning, this U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021 that potentially creates a pathway to citizenship for millions and millions of people. Talk to me a little bit about what your personal experience or any relative experience you've had with DACA, and what do you think of the program as a whole?
I have no experience with DACA. I was not eligible to be part of that program because I left the country in 2008, right before Obama took office, and I came back in 2020, in 2010, right? So I wasn't eligible for that. But yeah, pretty much like you said, a lot of my friends um, who had that status were like left in limbo. They didn't know what was happening, and thankfully things ended up working out for them. They found the resources, but yeah, I mean, I don't really have any experience with that. I wish I had some sort of access to that, but who would have known, right? If I left in 2008, that that was going to happen, right? So I didn't know. I came back, so I had to struggle to find the resources. But like we said in episode one, I was lucky enough, or yeah, I was lucky enough to be selected for various programs that allowed me to go to college, right? They were my own little version of DACA for myself, right? So they paid for my tuition, and I'm really thankful for that. So I'm trying to work with them to see what I can do in terms of support their current students facing the same situations, or even just reaching out with information that they can share with their families.
Right. And again, DACA is not the end all be all. It's and a lot of people think that they talk about dreamers, kids who were brought here like myself and like you, as children who didn't have a say in the matter. And we talked a little bit about it in episode one. But DACA is not a permanent solution. It's meant to be, yeah, it's meant to be a stopgap to a more permanent solution enacted by Congress. And that's what we hope this U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021 becomes. That it becomes an opportunity for people, for dreamers, for regular people and regular undocumented people across this country to become permanent residents and American citizens, because they come here, they work hard, they are targeted for abuse, they are targeted for abuse in the workplace. They don't have any recourses outside of nonprofits that work with people who are workers. Um, they are subject to scams from immigration lawyers. I have an uncle who paid $6,000 to an immigration lawyer who ended up turning out to say, "Oh yeah, I can't do anything about your case. Your case is difficult."
I think
So
my
it's
general advice for that. My bad for interrupting,
no,
but
no, no. You're fine.
one of, like I said, one of the mentors who has worked with me in the past. She was actually my immigration attorney at one point. Now we're really, like, we have a really close relationship. And she started a YouTube channel with a few other members of the community who are also immigrants or who are also immigration lawyers, and it's in Spanish. So I'll put the link in here for our Spanish speaking viewers. But essentially, one of the videos that they cover, one of the topics is don't pay anyone to do your immigration work, because nobody can charge you for that. Like, it should be done for free, or if you are doing it, you should do it directly with a nonprofit doing it, with an attorney that's actually, like, you're certified or whatever, or just directly to the agencies by yourself. But don't pay anyone to do that type of work for you.
And look, every case. Listen, every case is different, right? And if you are going to go to see a lawyer, spend a couple of minutes like looking them up online, man. Listen, like the internet is the great equalizer. It might be the great divider in certain instances, but when it comes to research, doing research, basic research on people, and if people are complaining, listen, Yelp reviews are like, trust them. Like if 1,000 people are saying this lawyer is a crook and is not good, trust those 1,000 people who are telling you not to. But anyway, yes, you are 100% correct. There's a ton of nonprofits who are doing magnificent work. We're going to highlight a few of them. We're definitely going to, every resource that we talk about on the podcast, we're going to try to put links in the descriptions, and definitely when we tweet out and put it in social media, we're definitely going to attach those resources to there. One of those organizations that I was I'm doing a little bit of research before the show, was Immigrationhelp.org, which is a non-for-profit that helps you prepare your immigration forms for free. Like, had my uncle um, done a little bit more research, right? And I'm not blaming him. You're never blaming the
I mean,
victim.
the circumstances push you to those limits.
Right. And you see a lawyer and you go to a fancy midtown office and you feel like this guy's legit, right? Whereas a lot of these nonprofit offices are smaller and they're not, in a fancy high rise
Yep,
building.
they have the
So
money, but their
they're,
offices are pretty much
yeah, they're using it for the right things. They're using it to get people, legalized status or immigration status or immigration help. And but yeah, immigrationhelp.org is a great organization. The New York Immigrant Coalition is another one. It provides information and services for immigrants, such as leadership development.
I think they also have like little programs where they give you a living stipend for you to be a volunteer. Um, yeah, it's not like a full time wage, but they do provide some sort of help.
Yeah, my sister told me a little bit. My sister called me after the podcast, and she was like, she loved it. She mentioned Catholic Charities as well. There's a lot of work with undocumented people and just immigrants as a whole. Catholic, shout out to Catholic Charities, by the way. They do tremendous work across the board. I when I in a previous life in a previous job, I worked for MSG Varsity, and we covered the a lot of their work. We would go whenever they would give scholarships out and contests and feeding the homeless and just fundraisers for everything. So shout out to them. They're doing fantastic work. But yeah, man, listen, I'm excited. I'm excited that our people are seeking us out, and we're not claiming to be experts, right? We're not claiming to be immigration experts. We're not claiming. We don't want people to listen to us and take everything that we're saying at face value. What we do have is personal experience. What we do have is firsthand knowledge of what these things can do to people, right? What we do have is first person experience of all the struggles that are currently people are currently facing right now. And that's what this podcast is a little bit more than a resource. It's an outlet for us, and the way the tagline is perfect, right? We're an outlet, we're a podcast, we're a resource. That's what we are. This is therapy for us. I felt very good after our first episode. It was like therapeutic to talk to you about it and to share my experiences and hear your experiences and to learn about you and for you to learn about me. And we're hoping that that experience gets replicated with other people who are listening to us. We're not here to say, hey, listen, everything's going to be hunky dory. Biden's going to help us out. He's going to hook us all up with, citizenship. Because we know that's not the case. We know that's not how, the world works. But tell me, how did you feel after our first episode? How did you, before we released it, before we got feedback, how did you feel getting some of that stuff off your chest?
Um, I mean, I felt excited to see what the outcome would be. I felt pretty much energized to like keep moving forward. I mean, we had to push the podcast back a few days because things happened. But every time that it was like, okay, we're recording today, I was like, oh shit, let's go, right? But we ended up pushing it back to like I think
Right.
today's Tuesday, right? Yeah, Tuesday night.
Tuesday. We're recording on Tuesday night, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy to be helping people out, to be providing these resources, to talk about things so that people know that they're not alone and that they realize, okay, what did that person do? How did they face it? And what can I do? What am I comfortable doing? Right. So I'm pretty happy, pretty excited to be doing this. Like I said, I can't think of any other words to describe it. I'm just looking forward to taking this journey and see how far along we get. How many episodes we get. Maybe we develop this into something completely different, right? We'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I'm the same way, man. I was energized as well. I was pumped, and the Eduardo's
Like we
being
stayed up
polite.
to like 11 or 12 doing
Yeah,
the Instagram, the Twitter, everything. Just sending it out. But I
yeah,
mean,
no,
I
we
wasn't even complaining. I was happy.
right. No, it's and happy doing the work, right? And Eduardo's being polite because I'm the reason why we pushed it back because we were supposed to record. We were supposed to record on the week over the weekend, and I had something to do. And then we were supposed to record on Monday, and it was my mother's birthday, and I had to. So yes, you're being modest, but it's completely my fault that we pushed
Nah,
it
it's
back.
so good, man. It happens. I might cancel on you this weekend. I don't know.
Oh man, so no, but yes, you're 100% correct. I'm energized. I'm invigorated. I mentioned it before in episode one, but I work on other podcasts. I produce videos And that's my job, my day job. I produce videos that I'm very proud of. Things, they could be from, information about COVID and the vaccine to, covering different events, sports highlights. There's a couple of different things that I do as my 9 to 5. And then I produce podcasts, uh, with my partner in this company that we're starting called Projectable Productions, excuse me. And we produce podcasts. We produce a couple of sports podcasts. But this project is different. This project is personal. It's completely different, and the energy that I have for this is different. It's not work. It's
It's kind of
important.
fun. It's
It's
kind of fun.
fun. It's
Yeah.
relaxed,
I didn't realize
and
how personal it was until I started getting feedback and until
right,
I
right,
saw
right.
your Twitter post. I was like, oh shit! I just told people my whole life.
Pretty much. And I don't
Yeah.
know about you, but it's like I've never been like that. And I don't want to say that I have never been like that because of my upbringing or because of my undocumented status or maybe a combination of the two. But I have never been an open book, right?
Yeah.
I
It's
have a
not just
nine.
something you can share like that.
Right, it's not. I have a 9-year-old son who is like this happy-go-lucky, joyous child, and many a times I see him and I wonder how I was like at that age, right? I remember thinking that at 9, um, we had just moved into our own apartment. Like, because when we arrived, we lived with my grandmother. It was my mother, my sister, and I, and we were struggling to get by. If I rarely saw my mother because she was working long hours as a seamstress in the garment district, and I was essentially being raised by my grandmother. But in reality, I was by myself more often than not.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
it's
then I
not
see,
like just having the company. My bad, but it's not just like being alone. And like physically, it's like being
right,
alone with your thoughts. Like you can't really speak to
right,
anyone. You know.
right. No, 100%. And it's like, you're in a new country. You're trying to figure out the language. You're trying to figure out yourself. You're trying to grow, and you're trying to, and then on top of all of that, um, you're trying to do it alone because of the struggle and this just overwhelming loneliness that you feel. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I'm like, damn, I had like a, that's why I went so hard into sports, and maybe that's why I went to, I because I was looking for these outlets. And we talked about it last time. It's the thing that helps us assimilate and adapt, but it's also the things that keeps us motivated and kind of keeps us engaged, entertained, because you're trying to distract yourself from the shitty life that you have, right? Um, had I been documented, would that have been different? No, because we were still poor, right? We were still
Right.
living in shitty ass Harlem apartment, where the electricity would go out every now and again. And I would think, oh, we got crappy wiring or something. No, it's like my mom didn't have money to pay the goddamn electricity, so the light would go.
Crappy
Con Ed would
wiring.
shut us off. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like those things. And then now I see my son, and his biggest concern is when he doesn't have a book to read, or when his charger on his iPad breaks, or my son panics, like has panic attacks because he has like a low grade on a test. But these are his concerns, right? And we talked about like struggling versus succeeding. You can't focus on succeeding when you're trying to survive and you're struggling. Um, so tell me a little bit about what your experience was. Like, I know it's similar to mine. And did you have that isolation? Did you have that kind of loneliness as a child growing up?
So I think for me it's a little different because I grew up for 8 years, in Mexico with my grandparents, my cousins, my mom's siblings. So I was always surrounded by people, and that kind of didn't change that much when I first came to the U.S. because we were with my mom's cousins, so I had their kids around me. So I never really thought about those things, and I was growing up. I was a little kid. I think the pressures of life hadn't gotten to me yet, so I was like, okay, I was chilling for a little bit, but then the second time when I came, or even when I moved to Chicago when I was a little bit older, I just It's not that I was lonely, I was just always alone. Like, I wasn't lonely, I wasn't sad, I was just always alone, it was like it was normal for me because, like, 1, I'm an only child, and 2, Chicago was really rough, so my mom rarely let me go out, and if she did, she only let me go out to my neighbor. Like, at that time, there was my 2 best friends, they were brothers, so they would either come to me or I would go to them, right? So I was always there. But coming to New York is way different. It's way different because every especially, like, if you think to, like, the summer or the spring, everybody's always on the block, just shooting the shit, right? Everybody knows each other. And when I moved here, I didn't know anyone. I was just like that kid who lived, like, in the middle of the block, right? So literally I would get up in the morning, go to school, and I went to a Catholic middle school, so we didn't enter like 4 p.m., 4:30 maybe. So by the time I got home, it was like 6 o'clock. I didn't have time to do anything, right? I was just always in school or at home. I was doing homework. And then high school came, and I think that's when I started getting, like, a little bit more out there. Like, in middle school, yeah, I had my friends and we hung out and everything, but I'm still in middle school. I can't do much, right? Like, there's not a lot that middle school kids can do. Now I don't know, I guess it's different now. I'm not sure. But then high school came, and that's when I really was like, oh shit, like, people are inviting me out, people are inviting me to parties, I'm playing sports, I'm doing other things outside of school, right? So I don't think I ever, like, doubted myself or I ever got, like, really sad. Um I think that was mostly in the beginning because I didn't want to be here. I wanted to be with my family, right? So, in the beginning, like, yeah, I was sad, and I was heartbroken pretty much. But then you kind of start getting used to it. It's kind of like a breakup, but not really. Like, as time goes on, not that you feel better, you just get used to it. So it's like you don't feel as heavy, right? That's the best way that I can think about it. And now I have, I guess, at least I'm looking forward to my mom being able to go to Mexico in a few years, hopefully when she gets her things straight. And then me, maybe in a few years as well. But it also makes me sad because I've lost so much time without my family, especially like my grandma and my grandpa. They're old, right? My grandma's 82, my grandpa's 72. So I don't know if I'm gonna see them again. And to me, like, that's what hurts the most because they raised me with my mom, right? So, they were there when I was born. They were there the first time I left. They were there when I came back, and then when I came for the last time, right? So, I think for me, that might make me feel lonely, and that might make me feel sad, just because of the love that I have for them. Um, and obviously I miss my cousins and everything, but for me, my grandma, my grandpa, they're like my parents. So, that's the one thing that I wish I'd be able to do in the coming years. Just see them again.
I mean, when people hear the words family separation, they automatically rush to, the kids being separated at the border from their parents. And yes, that's incredibly difficult and incredibly, ungodly to think of. But family separation also happens when people come to this country. They're separated from their grandparents, they're separated from cousins and families and relatives, and those relationships are severed. There's no, yes, you continue to have conversations, but at some point you just drift apart. And that is almost as painful, right? You're talking about your grandparents. My grandmother and my grandfather, they divorced. My grandmother had a bunch of kids, and my grandfather, um, you know, went out for cigarettes and never came back and left my grandmother. My grandfather had a drinking problem, and he had a drinking problem and just decided he couldn't take it anymore and left my grandmother with a whole bunch of kids. My grandmother with no opportunities, no way to support all these children. She came to the United States, and that is how our immigration story began with her. She came to New York in the early 80s, and she benefited from the Reagan administration's amnesty in the mid 80s. She legalized her situation, her paperwork. But by her coming here, it began the chain migration. It became my mother, my aunts, and eventually it became that the majority of our family was in the United States. My grandfather eventually became sober. He remarried and had other kids. and reestablished a relationship with his kids. And for the most part, it was a pleasant conversation. But you can't be a parent over the phone. And there's a lot of trauma in my family, um, between all my aunts and uncles, my mother, and my grandfather. And flash forward to 2020, it's all cordial. Everyone, is pleasant. Um, my grandmother passed away a couple of months ago, and it was very difficult for my family. Everybody was heartbroken. It wasn't COVID related. She was just old, and she died of natural causes. But it was a very difficult time. 6 months to the day, my grandfather dies. My grandfather lives in in Mexico. Only one child of his could fly to see him, and none of his children, or the majority of his children, were able to go visit him to be buried. And it's heartbreaking. It was incredibly heartbreaking, to see my family attempt to repair itself, and my uncles and my aunts to forge a relationship with my grandfather over the phone or otherwise, but being unable to see their father be buried and have to watch it via WhatsApp videos was heartbreaking. It was very, very difficult. And that happens. That happens where relation relationships are severed. Aunts can't visit, nephews. Sisters can't visit sisters. People can't go to weddings. People can't go to funerals. People can't see milestones because of that separation. You literally come into this country and you are undocumented and you're trapped. You're here. Yes, you have a better opportunity. Yes, your children can grow up and have a myriad of opportunities to educate themselves and then potentially travel back to Mexico. But you're trapped. If you're undocumented, you are here. And if you leave, you run the risk of not being able to come back or attempting to come back and crossing the border again in dangerous situations. And people don't see that and people don't consider that. When you talk about family separation, it's not just at the border. Is you are separated from your grandparents in Mexico. I am separated from cousins who can't come here. My mother has not seen her country in over 30 years. 30 years. She can't go back. And it's heartbreaking, man. It's fucking heartbreaking. And it's like just to see the callousness with the way politicians people talk about it. And um, like Ted Cruz complaining that immigrants might get stimulus, they get stimulus, and the callousness with, I can't remember who it was that responded to him. He's like, no, they're not going to get stimulus because they don't have social security numbers. Kind of like, haha, you're wrong. But like, yo, these are people, bro. It's like they're human beings. Like, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, it's so difficult to kind of see the narrative and the conversation um, centered around undocumented people and just the humanity just be sucked out of it, right? It's like crazy. How many years has it been since you've been to Mexico?
Like 11, I think. Yeah.
Wow. What would it mean for you to like be able to just go visit your uncle, your grandfather, and your grandmother, and just
I
like
I don't know. I mean, I think it would be everything to me, honestly. Like I said, they raised me with my mom, and when my mom tried to come here the first time, she wasn't successful, but she left me behind with my grandparents for a few months. And during that time, I got really sick. I don't remember what I got, but I got really really sick. I was like in and out of the doctor. Not like I was malnourished or anything. I just got sick in that period of time. I don't know what happened, and they were always there for me. Like they suffered the same things that I suffered. Right? They were going through the pain with me. So it's like my other set of parents. Like it's funny. Like when my mom got pregnant, my dad, he I guess he left that he left, he wasn't in the picture. And my grandpa, he was like super angry at that. He was like mad at my mom. So they tell me that he used to say when I was born that he was gonna give me away or like throw me away. But then I was born, and he was like the first one at the hospital with my grandma, right? So, it's just funny to me. But yeah, I mean, I would just love to see them again.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, man. It's and I can imagine the pain your mother must have been feeling as well. Your child is in another country, you're forced to leave them, and they're sick, and there's nothing you can do. I mean, we share even that similarity in that. My mother had me very young. I don't know if I told you this. My father was in medical school, and he he was in medical school when he got my mother pregnant. And when his mother found out, he was like, "You're throwing your life away. You're having a kid before graduating medical school. It's not the right thing to do." And I want nothing to do with it. So he left my mom. He left my mom, and he's like, "Whoa, yeah." My mom basically said, "I can't be with you, so good luck with that." And my mother was like floored. My mother was a very smart woman, and she's still a very smart woman. And she basically went to my grandmother and said, "Hey, I'm having a baby." And my grandmother, my beautiful grandmother, was like, "All right, fuck it. One more mouth to feed." Like,
Fuck
well,
it, love it.
like there was no no putting my mother out.
You're
There
the
was
first one
no
born, right?
yeah. There was like no putting my mother out. There was no nothing. She was like, "Okay, you
Fuck it,
know."
yeah.
Yeah, so you know, and then my mother came to New York following my grandmother, and left me with a relative when I was 3. She came back for me when I was 6. So my earliest memories do not involve my mother. They involve the relatives, this aunt that I grew up with in Mexico. And even those things kind of like, you know, like it created this separation between my mother and I. I love my mother to death, but it's like it took years because like my first memories, like think about what your earliest memories are of your childhood. If you can reach back that far, your first memories if somehow involve your family or an outing or a party. My first memories do not involve my mother. They involve playing with my aunt and like a broken tricycle. And then I remember my mother coming back and picking me up. But she's not part of my earliest memories. You know what I'm saying? I obviously know she would cheat. And that created some trauma in and of itself. Um, but again, those sacrifices that families make, man, to come here and to try to make a better life for themselves, and that's not a joke. That's not something to, the humanity of those stories and the people who attempt to come here gets robbed of them, right? And we'll say this over and over again about eliminating the stigma of being undocumented,
And
of
like something that kind of adds to that stigma, like it might be, for everybody's different. I guess this is my take on it. Like all those movies where a parent comes over and they leave their kid behind, and then somehow they get reunited, right? All those movies tend to have a happy ending, but that's because it's Hollywood, right? But that doesn't happen in real life. You might not see your kids for like 10, 20, 30 years, right? You might not be able to ever go back. They might not be able to come here, right? You might get arrested. You might be put in jail for like I don't know how many years, right? So those movies kind of don't. It's not that they harm; they don't really help because they're not telling the story. So everybody's like, oh, it's okay, And I guess kind of the things get equated like real life with movies, and it's not the same. It's not the same at all.
Oh, 100%. Everything does not have a happy ending, man. Everything there, I've heard horror stories. I worked on a documentary called In the Blood. It's about these two baseball players, superstars. One of them actually just signed a $340 million contract.
Oh, is that the one you posted on Instagram?
Fernando Tatis, yeah,
Nice.
he was the one half of that documentary, and we focused on uh, the multi generational family that created this baseball superstar. And his father played in the major leagues. Fernando Tatis Sr. played in the major leagues many, many years. Successful baseball player. But his father, Fernando Tatis Jr.'s grandfather, was the first Tatis to come to the United States in the 50s. I'm sorry, in the 60s to try to make a career in baseball. He comes to the United States. He plays for an organization in the Houston Astros, in the minor leagues, never makes it to the big club. He hurts his shoulder in AAA, never makes it to the majors, and his career's over. So the trauma that he felt, right, not being able to provide for his family, having a newborn in the Dominican Republic, and not being able to provide for that newborn, was too much for him to bear, right? And I'm not making excuses for him, and I'm not telling my, because this is not my story. This is the story that Fernando Tatis Jr., Fernando Tatis Sr., and the elder Tatis told us. He said that the trauma and the pain that he felt at being a failure prevented him from going back to his family. And he severed all relationships with that family. He did not see Fernando Tatis Sr. grow up. He did not do anything. And when Fernando Tatis Sr. became a major leaguer and a millionaire for all intents and purposes, the father still did not make any effort to contact him because he was embarrassed that he was a failure as a baseball player, that he was a failure as a father because he abandoned them, and that he would check on his son sporadically. And and that's the separation that we're talking about, and that happens. You don't have to be a millionaire baseball player for that to happen. There are people who come here and who fail and who struggle, and that fear and that embarrassment forces them to not to just not go back for their families and to forget about them and start new families because it's easier, right? And in this scenario, in the Tatis scenario, it had a happy ending because Fernando Tatis Sr., a very religious man, very moral, with high moral fiber, he went and, with the backing of his club, said, "Hey, I need you guys' help. I don't know what happened to my father. I don't know if he's alive. I don't know if he's dead." But with the resources of a Major League Baseball club behind him, they helped him put an article in the newspaper saying, "Hey, Fernando Tatis Sr. is looking for his father." And eventually they tracked him down. There was a reconnection. And this story did have a happy ending. Fernando Tatis Sr. repaired his relationship with his father, who abandoned him. Then Fernando Tatis Jr., who just signed a major league deal, now grows up with a father and a grandfather and a full unified family, right? He reaps the benefits of a happy ending, of a reconnected family. But that doesn't happen often. I'm telling you, I know firsthand relatives of mine who have abandoned their families and created new families. Now, yes, that doesn't bode well for them, but it's a symptom of the separation and the feeling of being alienated, and just it's just a difficult situation, man. It's a terrible, difficult situation that happens time and time again. Um, but anyway, shout out to our moms, right? Shit,
Right.
shout out to our moms for for risking everything. For It couldn't have been easy, right? Your mom left you for a few months. My mom left me for 3 years. It couldn't have been easy to separate. I couldn't stand the thought of being away from my son for
Yeah.
3 months, 6 months. It would literally physically hurt me,
And that's how we met. You were teaching at Hayes. You were working for MLB. You were
right?
sleeping like 2, 3 hours a night. If you were lucky, you were sleeping between classes. And I remember you telling us like, "Yo, I haven't seen my kid in like 2 weeks, man. I miss him."
No,
And like I laughed because I was like, "Oh, that's like not like I'm making fun of you, but I was like,
no, no, yeah,
that's
I
kind
got
of funny, for him to say that
it.
to us." But I didn't
Right.
realize like, oh shit, he really hasn't seen his kid in 2 weeks.
I mean, it was difficult. It was difficult, and sometimes I put myself in my mother's shoes and think about how painful it must have been for her, and how painful it is to not be a part of your child's life, and
Yeah.
also how difficult life must have been for her to be able to save enough money to go back and get me and
Yeah.
bring me back,
Yep.
right? Because I didn't come in a plane. I crossed the border. It was not like, oh, first class seat, let's go,
Not
direct
orange juice and
flight.
peanuts.
Nah, bro, it was no direct flight from Mexico City to New York. It was a harrowing, difficult experience that, to this day, we crack jokes about it, but it's like No, seriously, I'll tell you this. When I left Mexico City, we drove to a border town that I don't remember the name of, but I had my bags. Like, oh shit, I'm going to New York.
And they fucking
I
throw that
had,
shit out.
I had clothes. I had toys. I had all these my belongings because in my head, I'm moving, but it wasn't no moving. My mother's like, oh, the whoever the hell was running this thing. He's like, all right, throw all your bags out and only take what you can carry. Now I'm looking at my mother like, what the fuck does he
What
mean?
the?
What does he mean? I'm
Yeah.
not throwing my shit out. You know what my little 6-year old ass did? I
What?
said, okay. I went to the bathroom. I put on 5, 6 pairs of jeans,
This
put
guy.
on my shirt. My mother's like, yeah, you're not gonna make it. It's 98 degrees. You need to
Yo.
take that shit off. And I'm like, why do I gotta throw my shit out? But it wasn't a move, bro. It was not a move. I wasn't
Yo.
moving. I was attempting to get to a place, right? I was
Yeah.
attempting to get to a place.
That's pretty funny. Put on your jeans.
Dude, I had toys in my pockets. I had toy cars like everywhere. I'm like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? I'm not throwing my shit out. And that's how a 6-year-old thinks,
Yep.
right? And it's difficult. It's a difficult thing. And we joke about it now, but it's like, can you imagine when, like, again, I go back to my analogy of my son, but like, can you imagine me telling him, all right, pick up everything that you can carry and we're going to move. We're going to go to a different place, but only what you can carry. Don't worry about your toys. Don't worry about your clothes or sneakers or none of this shit. Only what you can carry. And I know that that's a unique experience to people who come to this country. It's tough, man. It's tough. Anyway, uh, this is I feel like this isn't even like a podcast, bro. I feel like this is like a therapy session, and I'm like
Just having a conversation. Yeah.
just getting shit off my chest, and like it's and I guess part of the charm of this is that we're being honest about our experiences. And yes, we're going to share resources, and yes, we're going to talk about like what's going on, but we're not immigration experts. We're not lawyers.
We're gonna have immigration experts on here,
We're
but we're
great
not the
segue.
experts.
Great segue. We're definitely going to have experts in their fields. We have a couple of guests already lined up, some nonprofits, maybe some politicians, maybe some, some
Some
inspiration,
celebrities.
maybe some
Oh, one
celebrity.
celebrity. I'm not gonna jinx it, but one celebrity, maybe.
Cross our fingers. Um, but again, it's just about like having honest conversations about individual experiences because every experience is not the same. Every experience is not like mine. My experience is similar to yours, but it's not identical, right? And we're just fleshing it out. We're fleshing out this this these people who live under the shadows, these people who you hear about in the newspaper, in the news. We're going to flesh them out. We're going to tell you, look, I was undocumented. Eduardo was undocumented. These people are real human beings. They're real people. You know what I'm saying? They're not just numbers or lack of numbers or lack of social security. We're like real people, real human beings with real problems whose life is made worse attempting to make it better, right? Because that's why we come here. We come here to make a better life, but it's hard. It's difficult along the way. So anyway, shout out to our moms. Shout out to what's your mom's name again? I
Elsa.
Shout out to Elsa and Elba. Even our mother's names are similar.
Nice,
God
nice,
damn
nice,
it.
nice.
Shout out to Elsa. Shout out to Elba. We'll talk a little bit about them in episode 3.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but anyway, it's been a very, very pleasant conversation. Eduardo, as always, thank you very much for being honest, for sharing your experience, and for serving as an example for people to aspire for more and to know that they are not alone, um, and that things will eventually get better. Um,
Yep.
any last final thoughts before we wrap up?
Nah, man, we just gotta see what Biden does, cause empty promises and empty promises.
Right.
But
We gotta hold them accountable. We
yeah,
can't just believe everything they
we'll see.
say.
We'll see. We might. I don't know. I feel like talking about the Citizenship Act for 2021. It's a lot because there's a lot in that bill. I don't. I think we need maybe like one episode alone just for that. But there's a lot of things in there that I don't agree with. Like, I think I wrote in our rundown. You know, handing or helping or handing aid to Central American countries as long as they take care of the corruption and the crime and all of that. But realistically, all of that's going on because of the part that the U.S. has played in that, right? And to me, that's like a big fuck you saying like, yeah, we'll give you this if you do this, but
If
they're fully
if
aware that they can't
you
do that. They're fully aware.
right, right, fix all the corruption. Okay,
Yeah.
we're on
Well, stop
that.
fucking sending back criminals. Like, what the fuck?
Oh man,
Yeah. I don't.
absolutely. We'll definitely discuss it. We'll definitely bring some experts in their fields to talk a little bit about it. We have some exciting guests coming up. But yes, thank you very much once again. You have been listening to our therapy session. No, I'm just kidding.
Did you
You've
forget
been.
the name of the podcast
I
again?
did. Don't be blowing me up, man. Listen, come on
This could
now.
be part of the bloopers.
Listen, I have so many different podcasts that I work on. I'm old, man. I'm 37. I'm not a young man. So uh, thank you very much, everyone. You've been listening to the Clashing Identidades podcast. My name is Raz, and I'm here with Eduardo. Uh, Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for checking us out, for listening to us vent about our experiences. Hopefully, we shed a little bit of light on the trauma and the experiences of undocumented people in this country.
Drop
Once
a
again,
like, drop a comment, share this shit.
everywhere,
Reach
just
someone that might
reach
need the
out
help.
reach out to us, and if you know anybody who might be in a similar situation, send them our podcast.
Our
If you
goal
could
is to go national at one point.
at some
At one
point.
point.
So make sure you check us out on Twitter, check us out on Instagram and our YouTube page. We'll be everywhere, wherever you get your podcast, we'll be there. So thank you very much for listening. We'll see you guys in the next episode.
Yes, sir.
Do your little spin.
Nah, that was the first episode.